Hello, my name is Catherine Van Arendonk. I am a critic and a writer at Vulture, and it is my immense honor to welcome you to this year's honorary degree conversation and to welcome the recipient of the 2022 Vulture honorary degree, Lee Pace. So I want to get the formalities out of the way first. Lee Pace, it is my immense honor to confer upon you the Vulture Master of Culture degree. Congratulations.
Wow, thank you. That's official now.
Yeah. I assume you'll be updating your resume immediately.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Oh.
It's so nice to be here with you all.
It is our pleasure. How are you doing?
Really good. Happy to be in LA. Yeah, it's nice to be here. I got to see some friends yesterday. And
You were hiking?
I was hiking.
Yeah.
I do some hiking. And I got to enjoy the pretty weather out here. You know, it's the best. LA is such a nice lifestyle. Such a pretty city.
We love having the festival out here. We come out and we think, oh, palm trees, and it just is a real treat to be able to talk with you and to have such great crowds, and we are so thankful every year. Yeah.
Yeah, I lived in LA for a couple of years, and this crazy thing happened where I wore the same t-shirts and clothes for the whole time. I listened to the same music, and 2 years passed, and I just have no memories of that time. No idea.
That sounds blissful.
That's why everyone's so happy here. They don't remember a thing.
Well, I am really excited to be able to have this conversation because I have been watching your work for a number of years, and it has always struck me as such a thoughtful and careful way to build a career. And I think your relationship to the roles that you play, but also your relationship to having sort of an online persona that I think is one that people clearly respond to, but is also retaining privacy, I think is so fascinating. And I'm just thrilled to be able to go back and talk about how you got here and how you made a lot of those decisions, which I think are so striking and such a really appealing way to be a celebrity, if one has to be a celebrity.
Well, I really feel like I'm going to learn something here because I haven't put this thought into it, so I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
Excellent, let's go. So I guess if you could just start first by telling me a little bit about how you grew up, what it was like when you were a child, and in particular, how you first started thinking about acting and culture. How did this start for you?
Well, a big thing about my childhood is that we moved around a lot. We traveled, we would be in a place for about 2 years and then move on. So I didn't really have any friends. And a lot of the people that I connected to were characters in stories that I read, and then a lot of stories that I watched. One of my favorite movies that I have probably seen more than any other movie is Labyrinth. And I mean, so many other like kind of weird movies that I don't know how they like found their way to me, but absolutely made an impact. And I swam for years. I was a competitive swimmer, and there came a time when I had a lot of damage in my ears. So I had to stop swimming because they would have to poke a hole in my eardrum every year to, like, it was so painful. So I had to stop swimming, and I was devastated about it, like absolutely devastated.
How old were you?
That was right before 7th grade. So, and I thought, it's like my life was over. You know how it is at that age. I thought I was gonna die. And my mother responded by saying, well, you're real dramatic. Why don't you try theater arts?
That's good parenting. parenting is what that is.
So that's kind of how it started, yeah.
Do you remember what was your response like, yes, get me on a stage, or did you think she was crazy?
Well, we were in Texas at that time, and I still had a very competitive spirit from the swimming, and so Texas will make anything competitive, and there were like competitive drama tournaments. So I got into that, and I fought like hell.
And were you doing like 2- and 3-person scenes? Were you doing monologues?
Oh yeah, and does anyone here know about those tournaments? Yes. You know what I'm talking about. I could see yes. So what you would do, you would compete, there would be debate tournaments, and then there would be some drama tournaments alongside that, where you would do about 10 minutes of a dramatic play or a humorous play, where you would play all the characters. So you would be like, like next to yourself. And then there would be like, absurd. You would like show up into these classrooms and like for like math classes, and one of the other kids' moms would be the judge.
A little biased, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. And you would just, act your face off.
And so, you did the first one of those, and you thought...
Loved it.
Yeah.
I was in. I loved it. And then I got to high school, and it was one of these really big Texas high schools that happened to have like a really interesting kind of advanced drama department, where kids knew all of the plays that were going on Broadway. We would pass around Stanislavski and Uta Hagen. It was the first time I read Angels in America, because at that time it was, I think, just coming off Broadway when I was a freshman. So I was exposed to all of these other people that I had a lot in common with, or felt like an aspiration towards these characters that I would read in plays and feel like, I know nothing about being, a man whose marriage is falling apart, but I want to try that on for a while,
Yeah. It occurs to me that when you're a high schooler, and particularly maybe a high schooler who has moved around a lot, and then had the experience of showing up at a different school over and over again, or at least a couple times, and then saying, who am I going to be at this school?
Oh, yeah, because that's exactly what you would do. Like, I had no friends last time. This is the time I'm going to get it right. And I would go into the Hot Topic at the mall. And
please tell me what you bought from Hot Topic.
Oh, something like this, probably, and I would just kind of come up with this whole new person that I wanted to be. But, the trick about something like that is you're not fooling anyone. You're only going to go as yourself. That's the thing that a 7th grader doesn't know. but I certainly tried my best, yeah.
Is there an element of acting that's like that too? That you're something of yourself is always...
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think so. Yeah.
Do you remember any of the early roles that you did when you were in high school?
Oh yes. Well, one of the big glories was I did. Do you know the Washington Square, the Henry James book?
I do.
We did the Heiress for a UIL one-act play. And we took it to state.
You went to state?
We went all the way to state. We didn't win, but we went all the way to state. And I played Dr. Sloper. So I was with like white paint in my hair and all these lines drawn on my face. I see pictures of it. I look absolutely ridiculous. But I was serious about that role. Serious. I mean, look, we made it to state, so.
It sounds like you had very good reason to be very serious about that role.
Yeah, it was fun. It was so good. We did a musical every year, and I did Crazy for You. Do y'all know this?
I was in the pit orchestra for Crazy for You in high school.
At Klein High School? I played Bobby Childs in that, which was very fun. I didn't know how to dance at all, and they kind of taught me tap dancing, but I kind of, if I would forget it, just shuffle my feet around, acting. Yeah.
I lied and said that I was also learning to dance, and that's how I got a gym credit in high school, was for being in the pit orchestra for Crazy for You. My mom is still mad about it.
Oh, she can let that one go.
You would think. You would think. Well, she shouldn't have graduated high school. We know she didn't have a gym credit. Anyway, what were your parents thinking? I mean, did your mom have a sense when she told you should try acting that it might really, really hit?
No, I don't think so. Not at all. But I was very determined once I started doing it, and I'm definitely one of those kids that was like, I didn't see any other thing that I wasn't good at anything else. I had no other options. I really didn't. And
tap dancing, probably not, maybe.
Dead in the water. But yeah, I was just very determined, and I actually started working with the Alley Theater in Houston, Texas, and they cast me in some stuff in my high school year, my senior year, and so I stopped going to school and was doing that instead, and so it was kind of all I was going to do, and they were, you know, probably really concerned for me, but I wasn't listening. You know, and they're very happy and kind of, they enjoy it. They think it's really fun, and they did that. You know, I think they appreciated my foolish, driven kind of, I'm gonna do this insane thing with my life, you know.
I would guess when you got into Juilliard, they thought like, okay, maybe he's pretty good at this though?
I think they did. At that point, they were like, because, you know, we didn't know anything from Juilliard. My parents are from Oklahoma, and, you know, I didn't know anything. I just knew that it was like this, you know, I knew some things about it, but I didn't really have a clear picture of what I was getting myself into. I was a child. I was like 17 years old when I went. So I think it was that competitive spirit that I was like, I want to get it. And I was certain I was going to get it.
Wow.
I was just certain. I mean,
wow.
Foolish,
it
right?
It seems a little unfair to me that it then worked out for you. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not.
I know, I was just like, it was the only school I auditioned for, and I was just like foolish. I mean, it's insane, actually. That I was kind of pinning my future on that. I didn't know how to do anything else. I was just like, well.
Yeah. I mean, look, it seems like it worked out, So then when you got to New York, was it like a massive shock to your system, or were you like, no, it's just more drama kids, I already know this?
I remember the drive from LaGuardia to Lincoln Center, where Juilliard is, and thinking it looked like Sesame Street, New York. I'd never been to New York before, and that's what I thought. I was like, this looks just like Sesame Street. And then I didn't really leave Lincoln Center. We would go see plays, but maybe I would like, I don't know if you can still do this, but you could pay anything you want to get into the Met. So I didn't have any money, so I would spend a lot of Saturdays and Sundays at the Met.
Which is your favorite wing at the Met?
Oh, we're good. The Temple of Dindor is pretty incredible.
Yep. It's a banger, that one.
Yeah, I mean, the paintings, the Impressionists on the upper floor, I mean, it's just like one hit after the next. I always think it's interesting about going to the Met, and after having gone all these years, you kind of have these little paths that kind of tell their own story as you wander through it. You don't know what you've come there for, but when you leave, there's like a real narrative of the day that you've had with these masterworks.
It's an incredible place, yeah.
But I never left Lincoln Center. I mean, all we did was kind of talk about Chekhov and, you know, debate the authorship question of Shakespeare. I mean, that's really all we did. We were such nerds.
Do you think Shakespeare was do you think it was Shakespeare or many people?
If we start talking about that, we're going to zero. Real quick, what do you think? Quick.
Oh, well, I think there was him. There was clearly him.
Yeah, I think there was a him. Yeah. I think there's something really interesting about the idea that there was an effort behind using theater as a tool of learning to this, you know, mass of people that, you know, wanted to evolve their use of language, their use of, I mean, there's nothing better than those words. They are the most extraordinary words that the English language has ever produced.
Which is your favorite Shakespeare play?
Impossible question.
That's what we're here for.
I love Macbeth for so many reasons. They would put on classic, like throughout the 1800s. Macbeth was the the show that they would put on if the theater was in financial trouble, because it would sell so many tickets. I love that. I love Romeo and Juliet. I love As You Like It. I like the wit and comedy of that. There's such a confidence to the way those characters speak to each other and use language in such a layered, beautiful way. So at Juilliard, I had all this time to really, you know, inhabit those roles, think about them, talk to my classmates and my teachers who were so knowledgeable about what the rhyme means, what the scansion means, like how you can find the ciphers inside those words. And what a gift that was, to kind of have that little laboratory where I could, you know, just think about words and think about characters and think about how they fit inside me, you know? I haven't done any Shakespeare since. No Chekhov, no Shakespeare.
Someone needs to call Lee Pace's people.
Yes, I would love to, but I'm very grateful for having had the time there to do it, you know. I did Richard II my 4th year, which was great fun. Yeah, what a role.
So you were then in a couple of productions, and your first major screen credit is a Showtime movie called Soldier's Girl. Came out in 2003. Could you talk a little bit about that character and how you came to that role?
Another thing that I was just certain I was going to get it. I was absolutely certain. I mean, I feel like what I'm revealing in this is a kind of like confident insanity. I mean, it's obviously a personality problem, because there's no reason I should have been cast in that role. I had done nothing else.
So for people who don't know, it was the movie came out in 2003, and you play a trans woman named Calpurnia Adams. It's based on a real life story about a private who is murdered.
Yeah, Barry Winchell was murdered in his bed.
Yeah, and you
beaten to death.
Yeah, by his bunkmates, and you play this woman who he was he was in love with. It is a lot of a role for a first screen role. Were you like, how did you prepare for it?
Well, the preparation was actually interesting because there weren't many representations of trans people available at that time, and certainly none that wanted to do what we wanted to do with this movie, which was, I mean, she wasn't the butt of a joke, she wasn't, you know, she wasn't punished in some kind of way for the choice she'd made in her life. I worked very closely with Calpurnia Adams, who I played in it while we were shooting. She was there for the entire filming. And so much of my preparation was just, you know, being inspired by her, trying to honor her, and mostly just trying to understand her, you know. And I remember thinking, wow, I've transformed completely. I've just done it. I've transformed. I'm someone completely different than myself. But then I watched the film back a year later, and all I saw was myself. All I saw was myself falling in love. All I saw was myself grieving inside of, you know, a different gender and a different, you know, story. Someone who was dealing with, you know, profound tragedy. It was such an experience. And I didn't understand at that time anything about what it was to be on a film set. I mean, they were like explaining what the mark was to me. I mean, Frank Pearson directed, Ron Nicewaner did the script, and they were such mentors to me about, you know, how to conduct yourself on a film set, what the work is, what the opportunity you have when you approach a story like this that really, you know, investigates a walk of life.
You won a Gotham breakout for that role, which makes absolute sense to me looking back at it, because I can believe that watching it now you see yourself, but it really is a transformative role. But I'm curious if there was ever any, as you were thinking about it as a first role, to a thing that you then were known for. Playing a trans woman is something that, you know, probably not every actor would say, yes, that's a role that I immediately want to take.
Like I said, I was just certain I was going to play it. I was just certain, and I wanted it.
What was it about the what? What was it about that
I found her fascinating. I found her fascinating. I found the situation she was that she was in fascinating. I found I was touched by the story of Barry Winchell, you know, child who was murdered by his roommate, beaten to death. They found his brains like 13 feet away from him. It was horrendous. And I found that very moving, and I, you know, wanted to honor him and be a part of the story. I just couldn't get it off of my mind. You know, when I read the script, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I couldn't stop thinking about the scenes. I was, you know, I was so fresh out of school and into thinking about characters, and like I said, I didn't understand the business at all, and I didn't know enough about it to even have a framework to think about it. I was just interested in them, like interested in Calpurnia, interested in what, you know, Frank Pearson had to teach me about what it means to be an actor on a set, you know, what's called for.
So you next did a show called Wonder Falls with Brian Fuller, and then that transitioned into Pushing Daisies, which is still, I think, a role that is really, really close to a lot of people's hearts. I wonder if we could start, I think we have a clip from Pushing Daisies.
Ned? Oh my God, hey, how are you?
Good, you look great. Do you know what's happening right now?
I had the strangest dream. I was being strangled to death with a plastic sack.
You were strangled to death with a plastic sack. That's probably an odd thing to hear, but I wasn't quite sure how to sugarcoat it.
Oh. Oh.
You only have a minute. Less.
What can I do in less than a minute?
You can tell me who killed you, so, you know, justice can be served.
Well, that's really sweet, but I don't know who killed me. I went to go get ice and I dropped my room key in the ice maker, and as I was thinking, that was dumb.
As she was thinking that was dumb, Chuck was strangled to death with a plastic sack.
And then you touched my cheek.
What's going on? Just a second!
Is my time up?
I'm sorry.
Well, thanks for calling me Chuck. Do you know no one's called me Chuck since you?
I used to. When I lived next door to you, you were my first kiss.
Yeah? You were my first kiss, too. You want to be my last kiss? First and last? Is that weird?
That's not weird. It's symmetrical.
Chuck's minute of life was nearly over. The pie maker's lips went as far as they would go. He couldn't will them to go any further. And as a consequence, the funeral director would go no further.
If you don't want to kiss me, it's okay. I just thought it might be...
I want to, I do. What if you didn't have to be dead?
So, it's from the pilot.
It's a little moving to see that.
Yeah. What does it make you feel?
I just saw Anna recently.
Really?
Yeah, I visited her in London. And when we were shooting those scenes, her daughter Gracie was learning how to walk, and now she's 16. Yeah. So it's, in seeing that, I just think about Anna. I adored her. Like, I adored working with her. I've never met someone who loves life like Anna Friel. And she came into my life, you know, at a time that I needed someone like that in my life, and she did for Ned as well. You know, what a great experience that was. It's so fun to see that. I'm a baby. Oh my God, child.
I wasn't gonna say it that way, but. Yeah, so...
Big stuttering child.
Can you talk a little bit about your creative relationship with Brian Fuller? Because it seems like it was something that was, you know, you worked with him on Wonder Falls, and then he asked you to be in this as well, I think. And it is such it is a role that I think is how you became most known. It is a thing still that I think people think about when they think about your career.
I love Brian. Brian makes me laugh. I love Brian's mix of humor and heartbreak. And that makes a lot of sense to me. And I can see it in that clip. I can see it in everything he does. And it's kind of where we meet. So to get to play this with him was, you know, just such a privilege. You know, to explore the character, to, you know, it was such a creative time doing it.
But it was also, I mean, we had a chance to have a conversation about that show a couple months ago, and it seems like it's a challenging kind of dialogue. Everything moves very fast. Everything is, I mean,
yeah, big network show. It was like a network show that they had very high hopes for, and then it starts coming out while you're still doing it. Yeah. And then the writer's strike happened. Yeah. So we basically had a certain number of scripts written, but then our writers were basically picketing outside the gate that we had to drive onto the lot. And we would join them for part of the day, but most of the time, you know, we all wanted to keep the show going. We wanted them to get what they needed, but we had to show up to work so that the show could stay going. And, you know, but then we ran out of scripts because the strike lasted as long as it did. We ran out of scripts. So that was a big blow to the show, you know, because like we were, you know, gaining momentum and, you know, building an audience, and we had to cut that season short. But the weird thing happens when you're like, you know, on a network show like that, and you're still making it, and then people are watching it, and then these kind of abstract numbers come in that somehow quantify the success of it, which mean like nothing to what you consider a successful thing, which is, this is cool. Yeah. You know, this is making us laugh. This is, you know, I feel really good about the work we're doing. But it becomes a different thing when it's on a network show like that. It's like a weird meta theater experience, because like when you're in a play, you get instant feedback, so you can kind of work with the audience to have a good time. You know, like you're all there together feeling the same thing, doing the same thing. But TV, it's kind of like you're sort of doing that as well, but you have no control over it, and it's that's a tangent we don't need to go any further down. They're going to take my degree away.
It's too late. They took the pictures. You're good. No, but it's
30 minutes.
No, it's interesting because it was also sort of your first mainstream role. It seems like probably the first time that fans became a thing. You're aware that there's like a lot of people who love this show very deeply, even if the Nielsen numbers are maybe not reflecting in the way that, you know, they wanted it at the time. But it seems like to go from a much more insular Juilliard experience and then an indie, a beloved but very small indie movie like Soldier's Girl and Wonder Falls, much though I love it, not a show a lot of people had a chance to see. And now Pushing Daisies feels like suddenly you're doing press, you're a character that people are obsessed with. What does that feel like?
Yeah, I didn't think about it too much. I didn't think about it. It wasn't a time that I was like, I don't generally consume a lot of media, so I'm not really aware of. I remember like when I was nominated for the Golden Globe or something, there was like Entertainment Tonight came to set to talk to me about this, and I was like, I know of this show, but I don't know what to do or say right now.
Yeah.
You know, so I was a real, you know, I should have prepared myself better for it, to be honest. I could have understood that side of the business, or I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah.
You can't take it back.
You can't, but I guess I'm also, it sounds like you took roles that were interesting to you, and whether or not they were going to be like massive mainstream successes or small indie projects was utterly beside the point. And then becoming actually quite beloved and having a fan base is just a thing that happened for you without your trying to create it.
There you go. That sounds great, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I wouldn't know how to do that other thing. I wouldn't know how.
People do. I don't understand it either, but people do.
Witchcraft. No, I don't know. I wouldn't know how to do it, but you know, we got canceled.
Yeah.
Pushing Daisies got canceled.
Look, yes, you got canceled. I'm still upset. It's fine, but yes, yeah.
But at the end of it, I always think about it as a win because I'm proud of the work.
Yeah.
I'm proud of what we made. I'm proud of the. I enjoyed the experience with those people. You know, in preparing for this today, I was thinking we're going to touch on a lot of different parts of my career, and the thing that came into my head was all of these extraordinary people that I've had the privilege to work with over these years. These directors that have, you know, taken an interest in my interpretation of a role. I worked with Robert De Niro, Steven Spielberg as it, and thinking about doing this, I pinched myself thinking how lucky I have been to learn from these people who are masters at what they do.
We haven't given them awards, but sure, yeah.
They've gotten other Yeah, it's been a real, and definitely Brian, Anna, Shai, Kristen, Ellen, Swoozie. I mean, it was just such a time during Pushing Daisies.
So it seems like that show ended, and then you move into this stage of your career where you are taking these roles that are really fascinating to me because they are these small characters in giant franchises. And it feels like that can be a role that you take because it seems interesting, or it's a role that you take because you're like, yeah, it's a Marvel movie. You don't say no to the Marvel movie. Or it's a role that you take because there is something really appealing about working with the people who are already there. And yet, it seems also so challenging to come into some of these massive productions and then be an actor who cares a lot about his craft and is trying to make these characters feel grounded. I guess I'm asking, are those roles that you look back on and you think like, yes, I am very attached to those characters, or is it more that you're sort of excited about the opportunity of working in film and in this much larger stage that you really hadn't had before?
Well, I mean, they're similar in the kind of space they take up, some of those movies, but they're like chalk and cheese. They're all so different than each other. The way that the filmmakers approach them, so different. I mean, so different. You know, the characters were so different. The needs of the movie were so different. Yeah, and they're big experiences. Yeah. Lots of personalities, lots of, you know, challenges, but you know what I can talk about, like with The Hobbit, for example, which I couldn't believe. I didn't think I was going to be getting cast in that.
The first time in this entire story.
I was just like, could I be so lucky? Because the Lord of the Rings was such a, you know, I thought it was just genius, and I think Peter Jackson is a true visionary, and with The Hobbit, he was approaching that movie as an innovator. He was, you know, he was shooting at accelerated frame rate. He was shooting it in 3D. So we were shooting with 2 cameras that would change the 3D ratio in the shot. There were times that there's a scene I have with Richard Armitage in the second movie where we're meeting for the first time, and he's on one set and I'm on a different stage, and we're acting at the same time. Yeah. And they're comping it together at the same time. Like, that's the kind of innovator Peter Jackson is. what a privilege to work with someone like that. Not to mention, like, Ian McKellen. I did a scene on a giant elk with Billy Connolly on a giant pig. Like, talk about something I would never have imagined.
I love that elk so much. It's such a good elk.
It's such a great elk.
Well, we should play. I have a clip from The Hobbit, so we should watch a clip from The Hobbit.
James, you once starving, homeless, seeking your help. You turned your back. You turned away from the suffering of my people and the inferno that destroyed us. Lay down blood, O soul!
Do not talk to me of dragon fire. I know its wrath and ruin. I have faced the great serpents of the north. I warned your grandfather of what his greed would summon, but he would not listen. You are just like him. Stay here, if you will, and rot. 100 years is a mere blink in the life of an elf. I'm patient. I can wait.
You know, he's so fun. What a fun role. Yeah, so much fun. I loved thinking about him. I remember I'd just gotten my farm at that time, and I just was walking around, like, thinking about elves.
Wait. When you're walking around thinking about elves, what is in your head? Like, what does thinking about elves mean for you?
Well, I believe in elves.
Okay, I'm gonna need more information about that.
Well, I've got proof. And I've got personal proof. So when I was shooting The Hobbit, I mean, New Zealand, which is just go.
Yeah.
But while I was there, because I shot for like three years, I'd go for a couple months, and then I'd go back home, then I'd go back. And I would always go on a big hike, you know, where I would backpack and camp. And I did Lake Waikio-Moana.
Did you do Milford Pass?
I didn't do the Milford Pass.
You should, it's great.
I bet. Did you go? You went
I
to
have,
New Zealand?
yeah.
We'll have to talk about that. But I did the Tongariro Northern Circuit, which is about a 5-day hike that takes you basically up to Mount Doom, where they shot Mount Doom. And it's extraordinary walk. But it takes about 4 days, 5 days. I did it in 5 days. And I was, you know, going on this hike, taking pictures with my phone, taking pictures. And the second day, I reached for my phone and I couldn't find it. And I thought, oh, fuck, I lost my phone and I've got 4 days and I can't turn back, you know, I've got to keep walking. So I would, at night when I was making camp, I would tear apart my pack looking for my phone, thinking it must be in there somewhere, it must be in there. 3 days go by. The phone is just nowhere to be, I mean, I've lost it.
You just have a pack. It's not like it's hiding some other place in your,
Well, yeah, I'm certain I left it back there. But I woke up on the last night and it is sticking to my back. The screen is stuck to my back. Elves. That's elves. Is that not proof?
I'm sold.
Exactly.
I had doubts when you said, but I'm in it now.
It's like a testimony that they exist. They said, son, you don't need that here. We're going to take that technology away from you. You need to think about other things. Look around, be where you are. You don't need that phone. It will not help you. Yeah. So they took it away from me for a while, but they're not evil, so they gave it back. But they were like, don't go, because that was also the time of like Hipstamatic. Sure. So they were like, don't go ruining, you know, Mount Doom with Hipstamatic. But tell me, are you convinced?
Yeah, I mean, okay. I think we're going to go home and really think about every time we've lost our phones now. So you have this incredible, you were on separate stages that you were shooting this scene with Richard Armitage?
That scene was on separate stages, yeah. It was, so that they could do the size ratio. That's the other thing, everything is like a sleight of hand, like a magic trick on The Hobbit, because we're all different sizes and stuff. I mean, there's shots on that Peter Jackson is a true innovator. He invents like cinematic language on those movies. And, you know, it's really worth a rewatch to kind of see those. There's that scene where Gandalf is in Bilbo's house and they're all handing him all different, you know, things. They couldn't shoot that at the same time, obviously, because they were all different sizes. Yeah. So that's like all this extraordinary piece of choreography and props and, you know, yeah. It's cool. Yeah, yeah. It's not just like cinema, it's like a whole other thing that he's doing.
So then you do a little show called Halt and Catch Fire.
Woo! Wow.
Oh yeah.
Oh good.
I knew.
Thank y'all so much for watching.
Can you talk a little bit about that show and what the experience of that show was like?
Oh my God, I loved making that show. Well, we just had this incredible cast of people that I remember we started just, you know, the directors change on a show like that. So we were like, we can create a company of actors that can, you know, really do our work, you know, and investigate who these people are. And if anything, just for the enjoyment of that. And we took those meetings really, really seriously. And there was, we would fight about the characters. And I was constantly defending Joe McMillan. I mean, Carrie Bechet, God bless her, I love Carrie Bechet. Carrie Bechet was so good on that show. She was, and I did not have many scenes with her, but I knew when I had a scene with her coming up, I needed to be ready, because she always came to play. She was always on, always so good. But I just remember being there and being like, Joe's right, and y'all are being unfair to him. Like, y'all are being, and she's like, he's a monster and you're a monster. I would get on the phone with the showrunners and just be like, this is not fair. You can't do this to him. You can't do this to Joe. Yeah. Like, it's not fair, it's not right. It's like a child screaming up to God saying, give me my way, give me my way.
And yet it's so striking because you can feel that in the performance, right? Because,
I felt it, I did.
But then it's also so much of what Joe is.
Yeah.
Joe is railing against all of this unfairness that he perceives, that he's constantly wants to recreate the world because he is so visionary. And what's happening is that the cards are not turning up in his favor. And so it is really fascinating to think about you feeling the unfairness of Joe, and meanwhile Joe is then the world's unfairness. I think it's part of why that performance is so fantastic.
Yeah, it was, and I evolved with him as he learned. I remember kind of realizing the foolishness of my kind of arguing with them about that. And then at that point I realized, because also no one was watching the show.
I was.
Well, you were the only one, unfortunately. Like we didn't have many people watching it, so there was no pressure of a hit. Like of repeating something that worked, because it wasn't, it didn't seem to be working.
It was working.
But, so we all liked it. AMC liked it and supported it and wanted to see us keep making it. So at some point I kind of realized, like, this is not a show about winners. This is a show about people who have the right idea at the wrong time, who are unlucky, who are carrying the weight of a bad reputation. That's Joe. He's got a bad reputation and he can't shake it. No matter how much he wants to evolve, people remember who he was. And that's life. That's American entrepreneurship. You know, I love that show. I'm so proud of, you know, the point of view of humanity that we got to investigate during that time. That I saw Scoot yesterday as well. I saw Scoot, yeah. God, I love Scoot. The amount of time we spent driving around Atlanta bitching about stuff. Just, he knows all the secrets.
Somebody book Scoot right now for an interview.
Yeah, it was a really great time. But I would never describe the way I work as like a methody way. I don't even know if I understand what that means, but it always ends up happening. It always ends up happening that you kind of find yourself, I find myself kind of, I don't know if it's me transferring onto the character, if the character's transferred it onto me. Right now you know, feeling very securely like the Emperor of the Galaxy. You know,
It looks good on you. Yeah.
We have another season coming soon, so it's
Excited,
cool.
yeah. I want to talk about that in a minute, but first I just wanted to talk a little bit about, you did Angels in America, which is a show that you said you were reading in high school and then have a chance to be in.
Yeah, I did. I had done scenes, Joe Pitt scenes, Joe Harper scenes in high school. Yeah. Of course, I had no idea what they were about. And once we, you know, were doing them on stage, it was, you know, and then in front of, you know, 1,400 people, it was that was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, was that play.
I remember seeing it, and I remember thinking, as an audience member, it demands your attention for to see just the full length of it, and then to think about what it is like to perform that over and over and over again must take so much out of you.
It was like, I mean, not to be corny about it, but it was like a spiritual confrontation at that point in my life, to walk in the shoes of Joe Pitt. He is a beautifully, beautifully written character who is going through the fire. You know, it's like, so for that long period of time, every day, I was just getting the skin ripped off. And then he kind of is stumbling out of that play, you know, going through the greatest pain of his life into a transformation, and who knows where it goes from there. And I think that's the brilliance of Tony's conception of Joe Pitt, is that we see him at the moment of change, but we don't see what the change is, you know, because it could be very many things. There could be a very sad end to Joe Pitt. Or he could, you know, find himself on a dance floor and, you know, surrounded by his brothers, and, you know, find himself in a way that is, you know, redemptive. Who knows what happens? And that's for the audience to decide. The part that I had to inhabit was him, like, realizing that he is an unloved human, you know, and having to break the only person he loves, her heart. It was torture, and it was like, because the play is so brilliant, it's immediate. It's like the train leaves the station and it's going at like 200 miles an hour, and you're just like, each scene after the next, it's hitting you in the face. So it was hard to play that character, because it is a tortured man. A tortured man. And it got me thinking so much about, you know, this idea of, because Lewis condemns him for being, you know, a closeted man, but my conclusion coming out of that play is that a closet isn't a thing that people choose. It is a thing that is placed around someone. You know, it is a thing that is done to someone. And those people who find themselves in a situation like that deserve our patience and gentleness. You know, I think about Joe in that way now, you know.
So, you know, at that was the same moment in your career where you then came out. It was a New York Times profile, which is a huge moment for any actor, but the Times profile was also, you are in this play coming out, and you have also recently come out. It strikes me as a really challenging moment to move through in your life, and I just wonder, looking back, do you feel like you have managed to come to a place where that feels more comfortable now?
Well, I never really thought I was in. Yeah. I never really felt like that was a thing, like any kind of choice that I made. I always thought I was. Yeah. But anyway, you know, the media will kind of create, you know, its way of talking about things. I, you know, feel strongly then and now, and would wish the same for like all the other actors I work with, that, You know, I reserve my right to contain multitudes. I reserve my right to explore all the different facets of humanity through my work and in my life. I think about what's called to my attention. Have you seen the show Heartstopper?
I have. It's so
Isn't it
beautiful.
wonderful?
It's lovely.
It's so good. And one of the actors, I think just faced like a similar kind of, I don't know, Tower of Babel about the whole thing. It's just absurd. But I look at him and he's so great in the show, and all I think is, I want to see what else you do. I want to see all of the people you inhabit in your career. And I actually don't care about anything else. I don't want to know it. It's none of my business anyway. I'd rather take your word for it than kind of take a, you know, some kind of hot take on it, you know? He'll choose to reveal himself in the work that he does, in the way he interprets characters, in the way he chooses the characters he wants to play, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think as looking at your career, it has been so fascinating, and I think one of the incredible strengths is the opportunity to inhabit all these different kinds of people. And as you were saying earlier, that way that the role, no matter how much you wish you could transform yourself, some of you shows up in it over and over again. And that there is something much more meaningful about that version of revealing who you are than, you know, the way that press has to wants to create these stories and the pressures of it. Yeah. It's
like storytelling, I think, is such a important part of humanity. I think it is how we agree on our values. I think it's you know, you can imagine cavemen sitting around a fire talking about the hunt, talking about, you know, who really killed it on the hunt, you know, talking about who ate too much meat, making jokes about, you know, and in that storytelling, the tribe figures out this is who we are, right? Storytelling has gotten much more sophisticated now, but it is how we all, when we watch things in big numbers, which is like for The Hobbit, I was telling you earlier that The Hobbit has such a relationship with the Make-A-Wish Foundation, the Lord of the Rings, and there are so many children that would come onto our set who were fighting cancer or who had recovered. And those movies helped them through it. And to think that here's a child, I get chills just thinking about it. These children are, you know, having the fight of their life, and they're watching a story about these little hobbits, you know, walking into uncertainty and unimaginable evil, coming in contact with orcs and elves and dwarves, and finding a courage within themselves to rise to the occasion. This is important. Like, this is, I'll never be one to say, oh, I'm just an actor. This is a worthy profession. This is a worthy thing to engage in, because it's how we get through moments like that. And it's how we together, like, think during the pandemic, there we were all kind of taking in stories and reflecting on how we fit inside those stories, how we define ourselves around them, how they've shaped or deformed the way we think about ourselves, our identities, our future, you know? This is crucial to us.
We have just a few minutes left, but I do want to watch a clip from Foundation, because I love Foundation.
We thought the gene editing was limited solely to Don's person. That it was done after he was incarnated. But after more extensive testing, it seems they've adulterated the source itself.
And all replacement clones
are no longer pure copies.
When did this happen?
We don't know precisely.
Are you saying that I, myself, am adulterated?
Possibly. Yes.
And Dusk?
Empire is being examined as we speak.
Thank you, Shadow Master. You may leave.
That's range, baby. So you play a clone of a lot of, you play basically people who are you. That's got to be like a weird challenge.
Oh, it's so fun. It's such a delicious riddle, because he's the same person, but he wants to be different people, and you know, and you know, it's no secret on the show that you know, I'll play many different emperors, and I play a very different one in the season that's coming up. He's, you know, very, very different than that emperor, and it's very exciting to see him then, because I was in the other Cleon's shoes. So they're the, you know, it's the great kind of, like I said, riddle. It's like a puzzle that they're, you know, they're the same, but they're different, you know, and in which ways and how, and in what ways do they believe they're different, but they're actually just the same? Yeah,
it's
no,
that
it's
same performance question again, right? Of like, the thing that you bring to, like, you try to be different people, but there is something essential about Cleon as a person that shows up over and over again, or are they actually so different that in their genetic makeup or something that turns them into utterly different people? I mean, it is such a really bizarre and fun storytelling idea to really be playing with those small changes between who they are.
Yeah, it is a fun idea, and it's fun as an actor to kind of know that that's one of the pleasures of watching the character, so that I can make choices that keep that conscious, you know.
We have just a minute left, and I wanted to ask you, thinking back about how you started and where you are now, I am wondering whether there are different kinds of roles that excite you now than there were when you were in high school, or if it is the same kind of challenge that you still really, really long to take on today.
Oh yeah, yeah. You know, I actually read Washington Square on the flight over here. Yeah, I picked it up off the shelf and I was like, oh, this is fun. And I read it on the flight over here, and there I was reading Dr. Sloper and thinking, well, maybe one day I
You won't have to paint the lines on now?
Yeah, I won't have to paint the Olive Arn them. So yeah, because he is very fascinating, but there are so many things about him that I just I hadn't lived enough life yet. You know, you know, the roles get better. They do get more interesting, more complex, because your life gets more complex the older you get, you know, I think. So yeah, I look ahead and I just think that'll be interesting, that'll be interesting. But
is there a role that you long to play that you haven't had a chance to yet? Let's will it into the world right now.
Gosh. Oh yeah, we are in Hollywood, right? It can actually, dreams come true. Do you know who someone I've always been fascinated about? I don't know in what way it would be that I could play him, but he means a great deal to me. As my favorite writer, Walt Whitman. I think he is someone who is endlessly fascinating. I'd hate to see the magic of him reduced into some biopic, I always pray that there could be some form that I could work with those words, because I mean, second to Shakespeare, but you know, he's the American master.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being here. It's been so lovely to talk with you. And I want to thank you all for joining us. And please give a huge round of applause to the case.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, this is a graduation ceremony.